All right, I think we can go ahead and start. And hello to everyone. It's so inspiring to see all of you coming together in this way. I know that I'm inspired, and I know all of our panelists are. We're here tonight and organizing in the ways that we do because this first contract will affect not just our newsrooms, but our community's access to news forever. We are already experiencing the stakes in real time and suffering for it as well. If you've ever wondered why something in your community wasn't being covered, there are a lot of reasons, but a big one is that there's a hedge fund draining money and attention out of our communities by cutting staff and coverage of what's important. We want to be clear about our goals. We need to stop Tribune's owner, Alden Global Capital, from enacting its model of cutting staff for cash flow. We know we can do this in our contract by, for instance, tying layoffs to the salaries of executives, including those sitting across the table from us. We're doing this to protect democracy. And to us, that means advancing accountability and justice in the communities we serve, as well as building dignity and equity in all workplaces, not just ours. To do that, we have to be able to do more than just roll in and regurgitate police reports or politicians' press releases. We need to shed light on the abuse and exploitation happening in our communities. And to do that, we need more people, not fewer. Our corporate bosses are scared of everybody in this room, and they should be. We come from different worlds, almost entirely separate realities, and it shows. When we're bargaining leave and talking about the trauma many of us have been exposed to as part of our job duties, the Alden rep joked that he could relate because he was struggling with house training a new puppy. And that same company rep also prefers not to have to look at you, much less talk to us working people in bargaining. And that includes our observers from other unions and community groups. Shout out to those of you who we're seeing again tonight. We often say in the News Guild that when we fight, we win. And tonight you'll hear more about just how true that is. But it's important that you all know that we're all powerful together. Our strength derives from each other. And it's also critical that you know how systemically sexist and racist our employers' practices are. If you've seen it on social media, our joint pay equity study documents this in hard dollars and cents. Every form of discrimination we surveyed exists at Tribune to the tune of thousands of dollars and years of people's lives. This extends to the company's hiring practices too. In fact, our employer's longstanding discrimination is in many ways made worse by its refusal to hire people, except for when we literally force them. All of us here are smart enough to know that coverage cannot be diversified by a company with a full license to cut staff. While these practices are not surprising, they are very infuriating. You don't get as rich as our owners have off of equality. They do it by treating human beings, employees like all of us, and our communities as means to a profit. And that's why it's really good and to see all of you here today so we can identify the same problem and work together towards solving it. And now I'd like to introduce Wendy Fox Weber, News Guild leader and Suburban Chicago entertainment editor, who will walk us through what Alden Global Capital's ownership of Tribune Publishing has done to our staffs. Before that though, please check out the link in the chat. We need to know that you want to support this fight. And also during the session, ask questions about our presentations in the Q&A button. It's at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and fill out your questions, and please don't be shy. Thank you.
Alden's takeover of Tribune Publishing has led to conditions which themselves have caused these reductions. Without doing a single layoff, our staff has been reduced by over 50%. These reductions, through buyouts and attrition, have further diminished already decimated staffs across the chain. What we have lost: cuts at the morning call in Allentown, Pennsylvania, 45% staff lost. No dedicated reporter for Easton, only one person covering all arts and entertainment, only two people covering all crimes and courts. No education, transportation, business, county, or local municipal reporters. No more editors for sports, business, politics, or state news. Cuts at the Chesapeake newspapers in Maryland. 44% of staff lost. Carroll County Times has lost its managing editor, sports reporter, nightly news editor, education reporter, cops and courts reporter, health and human services reporter, general assignment features reporter, and sports columnist. The Carroll County Times now shares an editor and staff with the Baltimore Sun News Group in titles covering Baltimore, Howard, and Harford counties. Cuts at the Chicago Tribune in Chicago. 55% of staff lost. There are no news columnists, no full-time transportation, college sports, or overnight police reporter. Only one data reporter is left, and only 2 full-time business reporters in a city of millions. No political investigative team in a city-state with a deep history of political corruption. Cuts at the suburban Chicago Tribune newspapers. No more than 4 reporters at the 4 remaining suburban papers in some of the largest cities in Illinois. Only 1 person covering arts and entertainment, encompassing 6 Illinois suburban counties and Northwest Indiana. 1 editor for Naperville and Elgin, 3rd and 7th largest cities in the state. No weekend or holiday staff coverage. Cuts at the New York Daily News. 9% staff lost. Print production team has been pushed to the brink after losing 2 page designers and a layout editor. Court reporting team has also been diminished, now with only 1 reporter in each of Manhattan and Brooklyn, each covering multiple courthouses. The Bronx and Queens have no dedicated court reporter. National Desk is down 5 reporters, and there's no longer a criminal justice corrections beat reporter or national NFL reporter. Cuts at the Hartford Courant in Hartford, Connecticut. 55% staff lost. There's only 1 editor directing coverage of politics, business, and community, state, and breaking news. No features or opinion editor. No transportation, immigration, or environmental beats, or the monthly Hartford magazine. Only 3 reporters cover a total population of 770,000 in the 24 municipalities surrounding Hartford. Cuts at the Virginia Pilot and Daily Press in Hampton Roads, Virginia. 48% of the staff lost since 2019. Only 4 photographers, no investigative reporters, no dedicated reporters covering Norfolk, Portsmouth, or Chesapeake. Only 2 courts and crime reporters covering the 7 cities of Hampton Roads. No reporter covering education on the South Side, encompassing Norfolk, Portsmouth, Chesapeake, and Virginia Beach. Cuts at the Orlando Sentinel in Orlando, Florida. 10% of staff lost, 50% staff turned. No reporter covering the police department, which employs 800 plus officers. Less reporters covering 1.4 million population of Orange County, while other coverage teams have also been diminished. Communities team has been diminished. Students and freelancers produce content covering 2 major counties. All journalists are juggling multiple beats and even working rotations to cover for staff losses. These smaller staffs are naturally working harder to adequately cover our communities. Now let's talk about those of us still working in these Alden-controlled workplaces and how we are compensated. Celine Martin, Guild leader and reporter in Virginia, will walk us through the News Guild's pay equity study released just yesterday.
News Guild members conducted a pay equity study in more than a dozen unionized workplaces that exposed disparities in the earnings of women and media workers of color. The News Guild conducted the study to identify bargaining targets and areas where Tribune Publishing can make improvements that would actually prove to us that the company is committed to race and gender equity. 384 Guild members were asked to take a survey on pay and working conditions. About 73% responded. Participation varied by workplace. Answers from each job classification roughly matched the makeup of various jobs. The report demonstrates what many among us working in Tribune-owned workplaces already suspected or knew from hard experience. Let's take a look. As we can see, median pay for women is about $8,355 less than for male colleagues across the company's unionized workplaces. Although women on average have 8 fewer years of experience than men, the gender pay gap is apparent when comparing members with similar tenure and is generally most pronounced among employees hired in the last 10 years. Now, let's look at the breakdown by race. Median pay for Black women is 22.5% less than that of white men across the company. White members have a higher median pay than non-white colleagues, earning about $4,530 more than Hispanic or Latino members, $7,740 more than Black members, and $7,510 more than Asian members. About 80% of full-time employees included in the study are white. On average, white members have more experience, but there are too few employees of color to make comparisons controlled for service or experience. We are human beings, and we know when we're being mistreated. Tribune Publishing and Alden Global Capital have made it clear what their value system is. We can see that while more than 2/3 of members said they are undercompensated for their work, women were more likely to say they are underpaid. Do you feel like you're affected by a wage gap or disparity in your workplace? I do. More than 1/3 of members believe they are affected by a pay disparity in their newsroom. Our report confirms these feelings. Meanwhile, Alden Global Capital, Tribune Publishing's owner, has shrunk our workplaces through voluntary buyouts and attrition. Think about what else this report shows. About 1/3 of members reported that they work unpaid overtime most weeks, and nearly 15% said that happens every week. Nearly 1/4 of members said they regularly have trouble completing all of their work that is assigned in a 40-hour week. Women reported they are assigned more work than men. Non-white members reported they are assigned more work than white colleagues. Around 20% of members, including full-time and part-time employees, said they worked a second job in the last 2 years. It's infuriating to work so hard to produce community news under these conditions. On top of this, pay is stagnant among members hired by Tribune, with most surveyed responding that they have not received a raise since 2019 or earlier. 90% of women have not received any raise, as opposed to 86% of men. That means 88% of us have not received a raise in years, even though a majority have asked for one, while costs of living have increased across the board during the pandemic. It might be news to predatory vulture funds like Alden, but to us, people stay where they can do good work for their communities and make a dignified living in a respectful environment. Our study shows that people who earn higher on the scale are more likely to stay or retire from their current position, as opposed to members making less. This analysis shows Tribune's commitment to racial and gender equity is lacking from racial and gender pay disparities, which have persisted unchecked. We want justice, we want community news, and we want Alden Global Capital to stop these racist, misogynistic practices immediately. We can beat the vulture and create a better, more just workplace, which is representative of the communities that we serve. Listen to some of my colleagues from across the country speaking to their experience of these issues.
No surprise that the News Guild's pay study shows a disparity for Latina and other journalists of color, not to mention inequities across racial and gender intersections. And it's bad enough proper representation still falls short in newsrooms everywhere, but we forget that it's not just about giving women and people of color a space in the newsroom. It's about providing the salaries and the resources to stay and thrive within it.
To learn that I'm affected by a pay gap comes as no surprise, but it is painful thinking of hardships faced at work over the years, including having to go on short-term disability leave with CPTSD last year due to the traumatic nature of our jobs, and now as our health insurance costs soar and my family struggles financially with issues relating to long COVID and loss of work. Over the past few years, the company has publicly expressed dedication to equity. That does not extend to our bank accounts. And for women, journalists of color, and especially women journalists of color, that needs to change.
Several times in my about 3.5 years in Tribune Publishing, I have found out that female colleagues of mine who are working almost identical jobs, sometimes exactly identical jobs, have been making less money than I am for the same work. And it's very frustrating to work in a newsroom where these disparities persist. Tribune Publishing should pay us fairly and equally, and we shouldn't even have to ask.
Another slap in the face is knowing that there are people who don't have as much experience as I do that make more than me. I know that they've started people who came after me at higher than what I got started at. I'm saying you should pay us all what we deserve.
The message had already been received. I felt like management had told me that the company doesn't care about the work that I put in, doesn't care about making sure that I'm paid fairly, doesn't care if I'm being paid less than people who are doing the same work as me.
I mean, we are reporters and we love our community and we want to tell good stories that matter to the community, but we're also human beings, right? And we deserve to live lives that make us happy, lives we don't need an escape from.
I love my job. It's what I wanted to do since I was in high school as a doe-eyed kid wanting to speak truth to power in the service and solidarity with the people. And I hope to do it as long as possible, but we need a change. The problems aren't new, but we can and deserve to move in a better and more equitable direction.
So I'm asking Tribune to put your money where your mouth is. Enough talk. We don't want to hear how much you value us. We want to see it.
A company needs to come to the table and do better and support its employees and build a sustainable workplace for the longevity of the people there, so that they can stay and continue to do the work that we really want to do.
What you can do is pay me what I'm worth, or keep losing people like me and countless other employees who have left this company over the past few months.
Thank you, Wendy and Celine, for putting that all into perspective. I think we all have felt or heard of this happening, but the study and everything mentioned earlier presents it in numbers and clear examples. We're certain Alden will continue to act like things like fair compensation is a detrimental cost for them. They'll continue to act like you're nothing more than numbers against a bottom line. But we've been fighting back and really shining at winning against the company. We've been negotiating our first contract with the company, and as we prepare to move to financials, we've already achieved a lot in many areas. Some of the major wins at the bargaining table include just cause, which is a clause that gives us protection from being disciplined or fired for no reason. We also won fair grievance and arbitration language that pertains to dealing with contract violations. We've gotten the company to contractually agree to pay for travel time during the workday. Then after years of debate, we gain language that gives members the ability to request a reduction in responsibilities and be granted up to 5 days off by the company if they experience trauma on the job. We established that part-time workers are eligible for holiday pay, and upon mutual agreement, members can swap holidays for those not recognized by the company. We also managed to get an additional day of bereavement leave from 3 days to 4 days. And after hearing so much concern about this from our members, we successfully bargained for unit level committees of employees and managers that can make recommendations on how to address issues of diversity and inclusion that must be addressed by the company quarterly. These agreements don't go into effect until we voted to ratify our contract. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. Some other wins in the beginning of the pandemic when the company came to us asking for permanent pay cuts for people making above a certain amount and the ability to furlough employees making below that amount as they wished, we successfully fought back. The Chicago table won no pay cuts and 3 weeks of furloughs over 3 months. And the joint table won no pay cuts for the vast majority of employees, except for a few who preferred them. 3 weeks of furloughs over 3 months, and a guarantee of no layoffs during that time. When Alden bought Tribune, there could be no layoffs because we were in status quo. And instead, the company had to negotiate over a buyouts package. Across Tribune, newsroom level issues that existed prior to Alden's takeover have been exacerbated by shrinking staff, the loss of newsrooms, and the general lack of communication from management to employees, resulting in unpleasant working conditions. Tribune unions have been fighting back by enforcing status quo, the rule that requires any changes in the workplace conditions to be negotiated, and rules against direct dealing. In part, they've leveraged the bad acting of editors across the chain in order to achieve a joint table that includes 8 units.
In Allentown, guild members have been fighting back against all kinds of bad practices by managers. They successfully pushed back when managers tried to get photographers to write listicles, a task far outside their usual duties. They restored 2 PTO days to a photographer who was given bad quarantine instructions, established travel time to an assignment. They established travel time to an assignment is paid work, which was under attack and fought against widespread personal bullying. Chesapeake is identifying member issues and working towards pushing back. They have their community behind them at all rallies and other events. The Chicago suburbs successfully joined chain-wide mobilization efforts that allowed them to become part of the joint table. In DPS, members achieved several wins to improve their day-to-day. They got schedules to be released with some lead time, got the company to do away with multi-year temporary employees, converting some of those positions to full-time staff. And during a transition to using new technology, they won an MOU that allowed them to carry over 2 days of vacation from the prior year and lifted overtime restrictions. DPS members executed a 1-week overtime strike too. And after numerous staff departures and unsustainable overtime loads, the company has also increased hiring in recent months. In Hartford, the union successfully lobbied management to fill open positions, culminating in an all-staff meeting that members called. Members have conditioned bosses to expect no more than 8 hours of work and to pay employees for all overtime. After years of insisting, Orlando got themselves on the joint bargaining table. Members fought against employees being assigned new work after experiencing a large number of resignations that left big gaps in coverage. Members also pushed back on managers' plans for putting a group of reporters on a recurring Sunday shift rotation. More recently, it's pushing back on a forthcoming plan by managers to tweak the beats of reporters, which violates our status quo protections. TCA members fought back against management trying to foist additional responsibilities onto members after their staff shrunk, forcing the company to make a new hire. They also got a job ad posted for a new photo editor and a company-wide meeting for the first time in years after members signed a letter demanding more transparency and staffing assistance. Tidewater members are fighting for dignity in the workplace. They worked with guild reps to learn how to push back against unfair policing of social media and against hostility from an editor who treats their employees disrespectfully. They also got a member a raise when his job changed. I know it could be easy to judge the significance of any given demonstration, no matter the size or the energy of the crowd, but I can speak to my experience, and they are significant. Every single public show of solidarity counts when we're doing these type of things. Check out the link in the chat. We know you want to support this fight, and checking out that link is one way to do that. And now I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Casanova. I'm a criminal justice reporter and breaking news reporter at the Tribune. I've been here since June, and I'm also on the contract action team at the Chicago Tribune News Guild. I'm 30 years old, and I've been a newspaper reporter and copy editor for 8 years. And I know that not too many people make it much longer than I have in this industry. Pay raises are rare. When they do happen, they don't keep up with our cost of living, and newsrooms keep shrinking, so we're asked to do more with the same amount of time. Throughout my entire career, I have always felt like I'm doing the job of more than one person. In Kansas, for example, I made $25,000 a year to be a county reporter, but I was also learning to design pages and edit book reviews around my reporting and writing. Tribune is my first unionized newsroom, and while that gives us the tools and the ability to fight back, we need to negotiate a very strong contract if we're going to stop Alden from doing what Alden does. News organizations are already under economic pressure, but Alden adds chaos where there was previously instability. We believe everyone deserves dignity in their life and work. When we have the resources to provide our communities with important information, we can all make better informed decisions. We can't get here without the public knowing what we're actually fighting against. Instead of losing time shifting gears between what should be more than one person's job and hoping other colleagues pick up big stories that fall by the wayside, which is something I see almost every day, we should be covering more deeply issues that people, ourselves included, are affected by, like mental health and housing. That's not to say we don't cover these issues. There are just only so many of us in our newsrooms, and we can't be everywhere. Instead of our coverage and the public suffering from reporters constantly leaving and at best waiting for them to be replaced, which doesn't always happen, we should have dignified working conditions that keep us here and keep our institutional knowledge serving our communities. And instead of forcing bare bones staff to scramble bare minimum social media presence, we should be genuinely meeting people where they are and trying to get younger audiences that our owners don't seem to care about. We need more resources so we can cover our diverse communities better. Before I got here, we used to have a Spanish product called OI. Chicago's 30% Latino. And since I've been here, what happens is I interview someone in Spanish, that story gets translated by me to English, and then it gets translated back to Spanish, which kind of just takes away the authenticity of these quotes of what these people are saying. That's not the right way to cover communities of color, in my opinion. There's also this outdated idea of journalists being a voice for the voiceless. I think that's insulting. I think everyone has a voice and we're not speaking for people. What we should be doing though is using our platforms to cover these communities more often. So it's not enough to get back to some kind of good old days of reporting. We need to be better. There's this idea that there simply aren't any resources for the news, but that's not true. There are resources, we just have to make them. We need to have these resources to serve all of our communities better, but we're only going to get there by fighting and staying together in this campaign and beyond. I'll pass it back to Monivet and Amanda.
Thank you, Stephanie. And right now we're going to go into our Q&A session. We have a couple questions lined up. The first one is, what plans do the new owners have to replace staff and compensate for the loss of institutional knowledge?
What we've seen is that it's really not in their MO to do this. And so it's been on us to push the company to make these type of hires and to adequately staff newsrooms. It's worth noting that local guilds have organized to force the company's hand on this. One thing every member can do is work to rule. And it's definitely changed a bit of the work culture in my experience here. I think my editor is a little bit more lenient on me when it comes to the amount of work that I have to sometimes carry over. That means billing every hour, taking your breaks and stopping, and having your personal time be your personal time. We talked about this in Orlando too. I think we all strive to be better journalists. And so we all have that push to, work those extra hours, and it's not actually helping us. So we have to take moments of just solidarity to really push it to the company that we do need adequately staffed newsrooms.
Awesome. The next question is, at what point do we give up on trying to hold Alden accountable, accept that the system is inherently broken, and shift efforts into creating nonprofit local news in the cities where Alden is trying to destroy our newspapers? And Wendy's going to take that one.
Tribune in general employs hundreds of workers. They're doing very important work, covering communities, telling important stories, holding people accountable. We did not create Tribune, but we are working within this structure to tell our community stories the best that we can. Going nonprofit is an incredibly complex process that requires multiple partners in the community. You might recall during the last months before the Alden sale was finalized, we held several events and rallies across the country seeking community partners. So we're going to keep working and we're going to keep trying, but we need partners. We can't do it alone.
The next question is, what can we as subscribers do to help your cause? Another one that's kind of similar is, I'm not a journalist, but I subscribe to the Daily Press. What can the public do to support you? And one thing that we're asking people to do is to use the Google form that we're dropping in the chat with the link, so that we can, build communities and build local committees to defend our rights to news in Allentown and anywhere that Alden is operating a publication. I know that, as Wendy was talking about in our fights to save local news, we in Orlando contacted our community partners, the League of Women Voters, Unite Here, our local unions, and having y'all show up at our rally, made all the difference, and it showed us that you all really care and are really integral to this fight against Alden to make sure that our communities are informed and stay informed. And the next question is, we know that the Sun-Times and WBEZ are now joined. Would that be feasible for the Tribune? And I think John's going to take this one.
Sure. So it's a great question. There's been a lot of, I think, good work among public radio to find ways to support more local news. But the reality is that we've actually lost in the last decade 50% of all local newspaper, traditionally called newspaper, but all types of journalists who are working in newsrooms across our country. And so it's not going to be one solution, but I think it's an interesting solution. And, if you've got connections to any of these local radio stations, you see a possibility there to support it, or even if you want to write a letter to the editor or contact a station manager, I think that's a great idea.
The Hartford Courant also has only one photographer, no investigative reporters, and no Hartford reporter. How do we convince community members to put pressure on the company to hire more journalists without making the newspaper look so bad that they drop their subscription?
Yeah, well, we don't want them to drop their subscriptions. So I constantly, talk about the quality of the newspaper. The quality of the newspaper is going to be better if we have your vocal support. And that could be just, like a little shout out on social media, talking about it at the airport, just getting the message out. When I talk to people about this, they think that newspapers dying because everything's switching to digital. No, it's because we have hedge fund vulture owners that are draining us. They're not thinking about us. They're not thinking about actually expanding our business. They'll keep it as thin as possible, and then they'll just keep buying. And so I think that's the narrative that we have to spread the word. And yeah, ask for support. Go out to other local unions. Talk to your neighbor, and don't ask to drop subscriptions. We don't want to give a negative light toward the newspaper. We want to make it better.
All right. Someone who asked, I'm a freelance writer for the Pioneer Press. Is there any possibility that freelancers can be organized?
Yeah, so this is like the crappy world that we exist in the United States of America and the National Labor Relations Act. People who are freelancers are not able to collectively bargain or protected under the National Labor Relations Act. So it's really upsetting. It's really unfortunate. There are a few things that you can do, though, that I think are productive. I think you should reach out to friends that you have potentially at the Pioneer Press or other contacts you have, because we can, in our contract negotiations, push for minimum pay so that we're A, not undercutting the full-time staff, and B, making sure freelancers are paid equitably. Another thing you could do is you could actually reach out to the National Writers Union. That's a group of about 800 to 1,000 freelance writers who try to collectively work on these issues as well. But again, kind of the unfortunate reality is that freelancers are not protected by the act, but like we're standing with you in solidarity. Like we need you to be leveled up too, so that we can all be raised up.
Awesome. Okay, we have time for like a couple more questions. What can students in journalism do to help? What should we expect and or fight for when trying to enter the field?
That was really exciting for me because I've been, a student in that position before. You come in with a lot of fire and you want to get started, and now is a great time to do that because staff is low. But I think going into being a student and going into a newspaper, you want to talk to other employees. You want to get a sense of the industry, but you also want to have your drive. And I fully support you going into a newspaper and doing the best you can. Talking about the industry too is okay. we have these frank conversations so we can get information out there, and hopefully it has bigger effects onto the greater story. And I would also say, know your worth. Don't be afraid to ask for a raise. And I can't tell you how much that's going to help you along the way in the future. So I would say, talk to other reporters, talk to people that you see doing coverage that you like, find out, what their worth is, what they think their worth is, and ask for that when you go into a position. And again, spreading the news, being frank about, pay and these type of conversations does help.
That I'm gonna be a little biased. It's from someone in Orlando. It's from Ella. She says, "Hello from Unite Here, Local 737 in Orlando. We're thrilled to watch you organize and fight for your jobs. You're surrounded by workers in other industries who are also fighting for raises, equity, healthcare, and more. As journalists, you cover worker stories so well, and we see the value of your work. As allies in the labor movement, how do you see your fight connect to other workers' fights?" I think you, thank you so much, Ella, for being here. And I think you answered it in the question, right? Like, I think our part in covering this labor movement is making sure that like workers' voices are at the top, that we're not just covering, the industries, and what bosses say, but also like going to like individual workers and finding out like the same things that like, we care about, like pay and healthcare, they also care about. I know, especially, with like Disney workers, a lot of you organized over the TPS stuff for Haitian nationals. And what I saw the Sentinel do and a lot of other media outlets is, go to those individual workers and like ask them, like, how is this affecting you? How does this affect your, your family? And I think by telling the story of workers, we're telling the story of Orlando. And that's how I think that our fight here with Alden connects to that fight, because we need people to do that. We have very limited reporters, and because of that, we're not getting to some things, and we're missing those voices from people in the community that need to be heard. We wanted to hear a little bit from John. He is the president of the News Guild, and we're very excited to have him here and to have his support. Thank you, John, and you have the floor.
Yeah, y'all are the ones that are awesome. I feel like I just get to bring the gasoline to the fires that y'all are building, and with community support, right? We are actually making sure that people know about these issues. So y'all are the true inspiration. And, the News Guild, for folks who are joining us from the community on the call, all of these folks on the call are members of the News Guild, but we're 26,000 members in North America. We're the largest union of journalists and media workers in North America, representing a lot of other social justice workers and nonprofits and staff unions as well. But like our real fight in this moment is to save local news. We've lost about half of all journalists. We've got hedge funds like Alden Global Capital really infiltrating and destroying our industry. And we have, as journalists, an ethical obligation to our communities. We have to be accountable to our communities. And when we are attacked by Alden, we can't be accountable to our communities. We can't make sure that there's a voice inside our communities. So y'all are an inspiration, hearing these stories, hearing the massive amount of work put into a pay equity study, which is difficult work to do. It's very emotionally taxing, because a lot of people on this call have experienced those pay inequities themselves, but being transparent about that is also one of our ethical responsibilities as journalists, and y'all are amazing at fulfilling that. And our communities are not going to be able to be served properly when we lose 48, 49, 50% of our staff across each of these publications. And, y'all work really hard to tell the stories, and we just want to do our jobs to actually tell the stories of folks in our communities. So it's really important that you join our fight, our collective fight, and support these workers as they push to several first contracts. And we're in this together. I mean, access to local news is a foundation of our democracy. We tried this experiment 200 years ago where we're going to give people the right to vote. And we can't have people vote if they don't know what the hell they're voting about. And a lot of that drudge work comes from going to city council meetings, going to government meetings, and providing that clear fact-based reporting and all the amazing work that goes into that into our communities. So y'all are amazing, and we need more help in this fight. If we actually care about democracy in this country, we've got to have y'all jump in and support us.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And thank you to everyone, all the panelists. Knowing that we are the union and that our communities are with us in this fight is really important, I know, to everyone here. And that's why it really fills my heart to see so many of you come to this town hall. Again, check out the links in the chat. We need to know that you want to support this struggle. We want to connect local news staff and allied organizations fighting Alden, their way of doing business, and what it does to our collective access to the news we care about. We're building local working groups, so we will be following up with localized information about the campaign, which will provide ways for all of us to connect and beat this vulture once and for all. So let's go on and let's save local news together. Thank you, everybody.